Signal is being annoying. All right. Hello, everybody. Oh, wait, am I on? What a pain in the ass. Oh my God. Okay, that was absolutely bizarre. Sorry, my internet was misbehaving and then I had to reboot the computer, but it launched automatically without even telling me. And oh my God. Oh, all right. Well, that was weird. No, my computer sometimes gets the internet just got goofy, but I love that it literally launched and launched me live without telling me. That's why I went here and I went, end broadcast. Oh my. Anyway, yeah, the internet was misbehaving, so I had to reboot my whole computer, which is not fun, but that slows things down. TikTok, I'm starting right now. I didn't want to start TikTok yet because I didn't want people to arrive on TikTok and then wait for 5 minutes and leave. So anyway, we're starting TikTok right now. Just to anybody who's watching on YouTube, once I save this for later, I am John Aravosis. This is the Aravosis Report. Welcome, guys. Little technical difficulty, but we will get rolling shortly here. All right. Let's wait for the TikTokers to join us. All right. Hey, TikTokers. Oh, hey, Puppy and others. All righty. Woo. That was just bizarre. Yeah, absolutely bizarre. Anyway, I'm back. Woo. Hey, guys. Do, as always, introduce yourselves if you would. Excuse me, where you are from and all. Oh, no, I'm here. I just got rolling a little late because my internet was misbehaving over on my laptop. So I had to reboot my laptop and slowed everything down. So what do you do? I'll go 5 minutes late. TikTok's already rolling. So anyway, hello, TikTokers. Who was that now? Oh, Bonnie. Thank you, Bonnie, for that. Very sweet of you. Let me highlight Bonnie. Bonnie. Oh, that was a British pun. Oh, man. Anyway, hey guys on TikTok, thanks for joining me. Hello, everybody. All right, let me get rolling here. We had a little technical difficulty. Now things are well. I am John Aravosis. Welcome, welcome. This is the Aravosis Report, my nightly show, Monday to Friday, 6 p.m. Eastern, where we talk about the latest news from Ukraine. The way it works, as you guys know, first half of the show, maybe a little less today. We don't have as much news today. Thanks for the gift there. Who was that? Iggy. First half of the show or so, I'll go over the news, and then second half of the show, thank you, Jamie. We will take your guys' questions on TikTok. You can submit the questions via the Q&A link that's in my profile. The rest of you can use the comment box at the bottom. And as always, please do keep the gifts coming. I do this for free, and your guys' gifts help me keep doing the news, so I appreciate it. Let's roll right in. So, the big battle that's been going on this week, actually for several months now, is in eastern Ukraine around the town of Bakhmut, and more specifically in the last week around the Bakhmut suburb of Soledar. Now, Bakhmut in eastern Ukraine, handy dandy map, Bakhmut is more or less where my finger is, okay? Currently, hey, Ellen, thank you for the gift there. Currently, the Ukrainians are still in control of Bakhmut. The Russians are trying to take it over. And then Soledar, the suburbs, again, it's a couple miles outside of town, if that. So more or less same location. The Russians are trying to take Soledar, and it looks like the Russians are doing, what do I say? They're making progress in taking Soledar, the suburb, okay? The Russians have been claiming all week that they captured the whole town. Obviously, they didn't capture the whole town of Soledar, or the fighting would have stopped in Soledar. The fighting's still going on. From reading the tea leaves of all the defense experts talking today, I would say that the Russians are in control of a lot of Soledar, but not all of it, which means the fighting is still going on. I think pretty much everybody thinks the Russians are going to get Soledar eventually. I think that, at least from the folks I'm reading. Bakhmut, which is the main town there, not so much. The Russians really aren't any closer to getting Bakhmut than they were before. Soledar may help them to some degree because Soledar, some of the logistics goes through Soledar, the supplies that go to Bakhmut for the Ukrainians. So that may help the Russians out a little bit. Thank you, Anthony, for that, for the super sticker. That'll help the Russians out a bit. But anyway, that's what's up. There's really nothing new in terms of Bakhmut and Soledar, in terms of the battle there, but I just wanted to bring it up to let you guys know nothing really happened. In terms of tanks, so you are aware that there's been a big discussion going on, especially the last couple of weeks, about tanks and Europeans providing tanks to Ukraine. Now, previously, Poland has provided, thank you, Ben, for the hat there. Poland provided, and I think I read today, something like 200 Soviet era tanks to Ukraine, which is amazing. I mean, up until now, meaning over the last 10 months. The Czech government has been repairing old Soviet tanks and giving them to Ukraine. I think they've only been repairing the Ukrainian tanks that have broken down, but nonetheless, they've been doing that. But no one has been providing Ukraine actually Western-made tanks. They've only been giving them the Soviet tanks that they've already been using, and the Soviet tanks are fine, but they're not as good, as you can imagine, not as good as the Western tanks. Well, fast forward to the last week, right? Last week we heard that the Brits, the French, the Germans, excuse me, we go on. There we go. Okay, YouTubers, everything futzed out. You're back now. That was very strange. So we're talking about tanks, okay? And the Ukrainians want a lot of tanks. They say they want about 300 tanks, which actually is correct. From all the experts I've been reading, they say the Ukrainians need about 150 to 300 tanks to make any kind of a difference. And actually, with 200 to 300 tanks, the Ukrainians could make a really big difference taking on the Russians. So that's good. Just for YouTubers know, we're talking about tanks, and that whole issue coming up in the last weeks about tanks. So the Brits have said they want to give tanks, which probably means it'll happen, right? Because the British government doesn't have to get anybody else's approval. So the Brits are going to be providing tanks to the Ukrainians, Western-made tanks. That'll be a first that they're Western-made. The British tanks may only be 10, 12 tanks, whatever. So it's not going to be a ton. They're not enough to make a difference, but my microphone's okay. TikTok. I'm not using, yeah, my mic is fine. Yeah. Okay, just wanted to make sure. Yeah, so we're talking about the tanks. So the British tanks should come because Britain's the only one that has to know about that, right? Nobody else has to approve. Poland says it plans on sending tanks. It plans on sending German-made tanks. Thank you, Alan John, for that. It plans on sending German-made tanks. Now, the problem there is that Poland, in order to send German-made tanks that are in Poland to Ukraine, they have to get a re-export license from, they've got to get a re-export license from the Germans. And it kind of makes sense because basically, if you sell your weapons to people, you don't want your people selling your weapons to other people without your permission. For example, Germany sells them to Poland and Poland says, hey, let's sell them to Iran or I don't know what, right? The idea is generally when you sell your weapons, you tell them you can't sell the weapons to anybody else or give them to anybody else without my permission. Now, you might say, well, so what? Let Poland do it anyway. Well, if Poland does it anyway, without Germany's permission, Germany will turn around and say, well, you know what? Next time we're not selling Poland any weapons at all. So all of a sudden, Poland uses a key market for its defenses, right? So that's why countries tend to try to get permission. Anyway, Poland announced that it will be sending the tanks, even knowing, of course, that Germany will have to approve. And the thinking is that Poland did this in order to publicly pressure Germany, let's say, and I would say embarrass Germany a little bit, basically put Germany in a situation where Germany pretty much has to say no, right? And initially the German government responded within like a couple hours and said, well, we've heard nothing about this. We've had no countries ask us to re-export the tanks. Germany's got to be careful with that because that's the kind of thing that is pretty easy to solve, right? When Germany says, well, no one's asked us, all Poland has to turn around and say, okay, well, we're asking you, so let us resend the tanks. Anyway, so that's the issue there. Now, one concept, I was mentioning this the other day, but I think it's worth repeating to people in terms of this whole issue with Ukraine getting Western tanks. The Brits are going to provide probably a dozen or so tanks, give or take. Even though it's not a big number, it is a significant breakthrough because nobody has wanted to provide Ukraine Western tanks yet. Everybody has been in a race to be second, I always say, meaning the Germans were saying, well, we don't want to be the first country to give Ukraine tanks, right? So if the Brits do it first, it again puts more pressure on the Germans to say, okay, your big excuse for not giving tanks was and not permitting other countries to give your tanks, right? Countries like Poland who already have bought German tanks, not giving countries like Poland permission to then send the tanks to Ukraine is you don't want to be the first Western country to send your tanks to Ukraine. So the Brits said, okay, we'll send our tanks first. And now you don't have an excuse. So that's what's going on. That's why it's important that even if Britain only sends a dozen tanks or something, it's hugely important because of the precedent it sets for other countries to then send them. It also makes a difference because for each step of the way, every time we've had a new weapon system that NATO has been willing to provide to Ukraine, there's always been this concern about, oh God, is it escalation? What will Russia do? Right. And each time Russia hasn't done anything. I mean, other than, bomb Ukraine, but they've been doing that anyway. Right. So we've seen with the HIMARS, we saw this with Stingers. We're now seeing it with the Bradley fighting vehicle. We saw it with announcing that we're going to be giving the Patriot missiles to Ukraine. We've announced all these things and Russia hasn't done anything, really. I mean, they've gotten angry. I've got a story I'm going to tell you right now that was kind of funny. The Russian television again is once again threatening nuclear war over the tanks that we might be sending Ukraine. But these threats aren't real. I mean, they threatened literally this idiot who's got a nightly show on Russian TV, and he also has a podcast. Thank you, Megwood, for that. He's also got a podcast. Thank you, Bonnie. I appreciate that. He's also got a podcast, and he was saying, well, if the French, the Germans, and if the Poles, thank you, Alan John, if the Poles, the French, and the English say they're going to send these weapons to, thank you for the heart there, B. Smith, these weapons to Ukraine, well, then we should just say we're going to nuke Poland, France, and the United Kingdom. And I'm watching this guy, and I'm going, sure you are, right? I mean, these are NATO countries. We've talked about this before. I mean, thank you, Louis, for the hat there. We talked about this before. We got nukes, they got nukes. They nuke us. It's nuclear war. It's the end of the world. Okay, just end of discussion. It's just the end of discussion. These are empty threats from the Russians. They know they're empty threats, but that threat in particular, people were thinking was probably directed at the Germans. Of all things, even though they weren't threatening to nuke Germany, that was kind of the point, right? Thank you, Alan John, for the hat again. They were threatening. Basically, the thought is, at least among some of the experts I was reading today. Oh, thank you, Alan John. You're going nuts on the fruits hats. I appreciate that. That's really generous of you. Thank you. The thought is that the Germans might be more. Thank you, Northern, for the glasses. That the Germans may be the most concerned among the Europeans about upsetting the Russians. Now, of the Europeans that matter, I mean, Hungary probably doesn't want to upset the Russians either, right? But Germany is in a pivotal role right now because Germany's got the tanks that everyone wants to send. And actually, I might as well mention that really quick too. We've talked about it before, but the reason everyone's talking about German tanks is because Germany has sold its tanks. God, is it something like 13? The number I saw yesterday was huge. Something like 13 countries in Europe have German tanks. It was a huge number. And it means not only do they have the tanks, so there are ample tanks to give Ukraine. In other words, giving Ukraine 200 or 300 tanks total that it needs to make a huge difference, that would be a drop in the bucket for the number of German tanks that are in Europe. So that's the first thing. Second of all, because there are so many German tanks all over Europe, there's a lot of the ammunition available for the tanks so that there's ample ammunition to give the Ukrainians. That's a big deal. I'm noticing Veronica is saying here on TikTok as well, the Leopards, which are the tanks, are actually also very good weapons. So that's a whole other reason they're good weapons. But again, we've got the ammunition. Somebody's here is saying 18 countries. It's a lot of European countries that have the tanks. So basically, there's ample weapons to actually give the Ukrainians, which is why everyone's talking about it. Let's go on here. Oh, this was kind of interesting. So a former British Army chief, this must have been on Sky News today, was talking about the British talk about giving 12 tanks or so to the Ukrainians. And he got rather upset and called it tokenistic. His name is, where's his name? A former chief of the British Army's General Staff, Lord Dannett, told Sky News, it would seem that 12 is too tokenistic, meaning it's just like a token. You're giving them, it's just like you're giving them something that doesn't matter, right? Is too tokenistic. And I would suggest sending 25 or 30 or even as many as 50. That would make a real difference. Now, that was interesting to me because that's the first time I've seen anybody saying 50 tanks would be enough to make a real difference. That's good. I mean, typically you'd see more like 150 tanks, 200 tanks that they're talking about. He explained that Ukraine is likely to see Russia mount some form of offensive in the late winter or early spring, so additional support is needed ever increasingly from the West. He then said there is a chance that the Ukrainians could just strike decisive blows on the Russians, perhaps even to break the morale of the Russian soldiers. So what he's talking about there, thank you, Nat, for the hat. What he's talking about there is that if we give the Ukrainians enough, we need to give the Ukrainians more tanks and more weapons because there is increasing concern about the Russians having some kind of counteroffensive or an offensive in spring, that they're amassing their troops, amassing their men, and going to have some massive attack, and that for the Ukrainians to stop the Russians or even push them back, they need more tanks. Okay, that's the first thing. Secondly, he's saying that if we give, this is the former head of the British Army, if we give enough of these weapons to Ukraine, Ukraine can give such a decisive blow to the Russians that potentially they can break the morale of the Russian soldiers. Now, this is a point that a lot of the former generals and others have brought up before, which is this concept of basically the Russian military falling apart to a degree where things go so badly that, basically the soldiers run. I mean, actually what we saw in a microcosm happening in eastern Ukraine. Remember several months ago when the Ukrainians around Kharkiv and then going east, right? You had Kharkiv up here and this sort of eastern area, and I'm forgetting the exact border, but you had a lot of Russians surrounding Kharkiv and around here, and the Ukrainians just pushed them back to here. And I mean, literally emptied the Russians out completely up to about here. The Russians crumbled. I mean, it was way too fast. Thank you, Chaz, for that. It was way too fast for the Russians, and the troops were so freaked out that they were basically just running for their lives. That's the kind of thing you want to happen, but on a much larger level where the Russian troops are just freaking out, the morale collapses, and you have a real rout that sets Putin back significantly. Another story today, Russia might be looking at raising the age of conscription. Conscription, I mean, I want to say draft, but it's a little different. I guess it's a draft to some degree. I don't know how you'd call it, because in America, we don't have this anymore. But it's the idea that, everyone at the age of 18 has to sign up for military service. And we do have that. You have to register in America, but what we don't have to serve. Our military is all volunteer. And our training, none of us have training. It's all, you join the military if you want training, but none of us have had military training just because we're 18. The Russians have a system where men from, 18 to 27 have to register, and then a certain segment twice a year. I think they typically pick like 150,000 men, 125,000, something like that, twice a year. The people they pick, randomly or whatever, have to serve for like a year or something, right? And forget the wartime. That's the normal status. Well, what the Russians are trying to do, because they're still having issues getting men to serve and getting enough men, they're looking at potentially raising the age of conscription. Well, changing it actually, moving it from 18 to 27 to 21 to 30. Now, that was interesting to me. I mean, it only came out today that they're talking about this, and I'm intrigued as to why they're thinking about this. Because first of all, moving from 18 to 21 is interesting because you're getting rid of the younger guys, right? And I don't know if they think it helps in terms of college-age kids, because certainly it would take fewer kids out of college. It might freak the parents out a little bit, losing your 18-year-old to, well, not losing, but meaning your 18-year-old gets drafted is probably even freakier than your 21-year-old being drafted, right? Also, 27 to 30, you get a little more experience, a couple years. But anyway, the thinking on this was somehow this was going to help the Russians get more men. And I wasn't quite sure, without knowing Russian demographics, how that actually works. I am John Aravosis. You are watching the Aravosis Report. We started a little late today because the internet was being totally evil, but we're here now. I'll go a little late tonight to recompense. Thank you, Annie, for that. I have a Patreon as well that you guys can help out on. If you want to help out, if you want to, give $5 a month or something like that to support my work, I'd appreciate it. You can go to patreon.com/Aravosis. You can also find all of the links, my Patreon, my Discord, all sorts of stuff via aravosis.com, my last name.com. Or on TikTok, it's very easy. Just go to the Linktree link in my profile on TikTok. It takes you to all my stuff. But I do appreciate the gifts. Keep the gifts coming, guys. I do this for free, and been doing it full time since the war broke out, and basically am surviving with your guys' gifts. So please keep it coming. Thank you, Crowded there, and Bergman for the gifts on TikTok. Let me keep going here. And Laura for the hearts. Belarus. The U.S. weighed in today. Thank you, Flower Lady. That was very generous of you. I know that's a nice one. Thank you. The Belarus today. Belarus. Let's talk about Belarus again. Grifter. I love this. Grifter. Okay. Since whenever the trolls do this, I feel like we have to make this a little bit of a telethon. So little troll just, what are the Russians? Grifter. Grifter meaning, oh, you're just trying to make money. I do not make enough money to pay. I'm not going to do a long pitch here, but I don't make enough money to pay my bills. I have been working at a deficit since the war broke out because this stuff matters to me. And unfortunately, too much in my life, I have done this before on a lot of civil rights work that I've done and everything else. I never tried to make money, and I ended up making a deficit. Well, the same thing's happening now. Your guys' gifts have been great. They've been very generous. They help me do my work, but they still don't break even to pay my mortgage and to pay everything else. They don't, but that's fine. because I want to do this work. But it's an important point to remind folks, because especially on the left, I see this. On the right, not as much. I mean, that was just a Russian troll. But one issue we have in America, especially on the left, I would say worldwide, there is a lack of appreciation for the fact that we got to pay people to do stuff. And for example, activists. I mean, I could do a whole talk about this, but we don't fund activists on the right are funded. Activists on the left never get funded. And even, I mean, it doesn't matter how good you are. And it's something, and I don't just mean this for me today, but I mean this in general, when you're out there, if you're on TikTok, if you're on other services, you see people who are creators you like, just keep in mind that if somebody's devoting, thank you for the Aflac duck there, if someone's devoting significant amounts of time, A, and B, doing something that's really worthwhile that you like, chip in and support them, because people don't. And I don't mean people don't. You guys have actually been really generous, but in general, people don't think of it. I mean, one funny little aside, and then I'll get back to the news though. Once I was doing my blog, and I was writing full time on a blog for years. I mean, for years I was doing my blog. I had one of the most important blogs in the U.S. U.S. politics back in the 2000s. And I mean, and I'm a journalist. I've written for The Economist. I've written for others. And somebody literally said to me, "All you do is write all day. Why should I pay you for that? I can write." And I was sitting there going, all someone does is write all day? Thank you, Happy Beach family. Like the idea that writing, who doesn't like to write? I mean, people hate writing, right? But there is this concept of not supporting people. Anyway, whatever. You guys aren't that way, but it's important to bring it up. Thank you, Bergman, because I think it's important to still respond to the trolls, because some people might look and go, "You're trying to make money off the Ukrainians," and that's a fair point. We don't. Thank you for Tay. I've actually raised, this will be my final point, but we've raised now almost $85,000 for doing humanitarian aid in Ukraine. None of that money have I touched. 100% of that went to Ukraine. And I basically make my money, thank you, Slow Roasted, off of the TikTok gifts, the YouTube gifts, and a lot of the auctions we've got on Discord and stuff like that. And again, it's still not enough to pay my mortgage and my bills, but it helps. So I still have hope that this can get big enough. So we're going to keep doing it. Grr. All right, we're back. Belarus. So Belarus, I was going to explain Belarus again. Thank you, Marcy. So Belarus is a country bordering Ukraine up here in the Northwest. There is a pin up there. No, there is no pin up here. This is my good map. Thank you, Cami, for that. This is my good map. Yeah, the writing thing still cracks me up. Like, all you do is write all day. And I'm like, people hate writing. People suck at writing. Like, the idea, what kind of a normal person would go, "Oh, I wish I could write all day for a living." Like nobody wants to write. It's like doing public speaking. You know what I mean? Like, hey, wouldn't you like to get on TV for, in any case, Belarus up here, bordering Ukraine, run by a dictator, Lukashenko, best friends with Putin. Putin invaded Ukraine along, pull the map over, a number of different places, up through Crimea, through here, I think through here, and then through Belarus. So Russia, this is all Russia here. The Russians also came through Belarus and down to try to take Kyiv. So Belarus has been an important ally of Russia. But the one thing Belarus did not do as an ally of Russia, Belarus did not invade. They themselves did not invade. They let Putin invade via their country, but they've not used the Belarusian army to actually attack Ukraine, which was very interesting. And the thinking is that Putin has been putting a lot of pressure on the Belarusians to try to force them to invade because he'd like nothing better. I mean, not that the Belarusian army is going to make much of a difference. The Belarusian army is small. They're not very good, right? The Ukrainian army could destroy them. Also, the Ukrainians have put a lot of minefields and everything else along the border here. But the reason the Russians actually would like the Belarusians to invade is this. The biggest fighting going on right now is over here in Bakhmut, right, and Soledar. The second big amount of fighting is over in Kharkiv, around here. This and this are very far from this. The Russians would like nothing better than for the Ukrainians to worry that the Belarusians are going to invade. So Ukraine has no choice but to put more troops up here at the Belarusian border just in case. And Ukrainian troops that are sitting here on their butts are not helping the battle down here and the battle over here. That's why you keep hearing so much about Belarus. Thank you, C, for that. That was nice of you. I appreciate that. That's why you keep hearing so much about Belarus, because it is possible. It is possible that Putin. Oh, did I say here's? Well, I don't know. Maybe I mixed up Kherson and Kharkiv. Kherson down here, Kharkiv up here. Big fighting in Kherson. Big fighting here in Bakhmut. So in any case, what was I going with this? Belarus. So the U.S. is still saying, and this was today, the U.S. does not see signs of an imminent threat of an offensive against Ukraine. According to Pentagon Press Secretary Pat Ryder, we continue to closely monitor what we know to be excessive engagements with Belarusian forces by Russian forces, but there are currently no signs of any type of offensive action that appears imminent. As you know, the U.S. was more than happy to go public with the U.S. government's concerns of Russia invading Ukraine. So the fact that the U.S. government is saying that they don't see any kind of a imminent attack from Belarus, I think, is important. The Brits, I'm raising this because somebody had asked the other day, I think yesterday, about the two British volunteers who disappeared in Ukraine, and one of them supposedly was found dead or killed by the Wagner Group mercenaries. According to Downing Street, which is the Prime Minister, reports have yet to be verified that one of two British men, this is from Sky News, missing in Ukraine has been found dead. The two aid workers, Andrew Bagshaw, age 48, and 28-year-old Christopher Perry, have been missing since Friday. Russian mercenary group Wagner claims they have discovered the remains of one of them, but the Prime Minister's office says these are speculative reports. So we really don't have any news yet. And again, the Russians tend to lie. So we really shouldn't necessarily believe that. Let's see here. This was interesting too. A Russian man just was given 5 years in jail for refusing to fight. He's a 24-year-old fighting with the Russian military in Ukraine. He didn't report for duty in May of 2022. He did not want to participate in the special military operation, and they gave him 5 years in jail. Now, I think the article didn't say, but I think this is the same guy I mentioned the other day who was he got a medal. I mean, like he did so well that first month. He blew up 5 Ukrainian vehicles or something, and the Russians gave him a medal. And then he got a month off, and he refused to go back and fight again. So they threw the book at him, and he's being jailed for 5 years as a result. Final thing I wanted to mention is kind of a scary poll on Republicans here in the U.S. from CBS News. Thank you, Alan John, from CBS News and YouGov. A slight majority of Republicans could use that Ukraine money on shoring up the border. Literally, nobody's saying that. But this worries me because, and hello, welcome back, YouTubers. No idea what happened. It was gone. You're back now. What worries me is that if we're seeing poll numbers that now a slim majority of Republicans want aid to cut off entirely to Ukraine, that's crazy. I mean, that's freaking crazy. And that worries me. Now, I did write a quick note to myself on the notes. I blame two things. One, Joe Biden, and two, Republicans, and here's why. Okay. The first problem is the whatever. The first issue is that Biden, I don't think, has done nearly enough explanation of why the war matters. He hasn't done any explanation of why the war matters. I'm sorry. I think he's done a good job of rallying the world and getting everybody together, but Biden has just done, I think, no explanation at all of why we're there, of why we're spending the money. I think it's hugely important. I think taking the Russians down a peg, hugely important for the future, for our safety as we go forward, for the West, for the world, but and frankly, democracy, right? Helping democracies that are big, stopping genocide. These are good things, right? Nonetheless, Biden, I think, doesn't explain that at all. At the same time, you've got Fox News saying we shouldn't be there. It's all corrupt, blah, 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 blah. But you also don't have any Republicans that are really out there kind of promoting to Republicans why this matters. I mean, Mitch McConnell is great. Don't get me wrong. Mitch McConnell is the leader of the Republicans in the U.S. Senate. Very strong supporter of Ukraine. He says it's the number one priority, funding Ukraine. That's great. But you know what? McConnell or somebody else? And by the way, McConnell can get other top Republicans. He needs to get his people together to start talking more to Republicans about why this matters, right? McConnell can get his top lieutenants in the Senate, other Republican senators. I don't just blame McConnell, but Republicans who actually understand national defense, who actually care about national defense, who care about America, who are not Russian and Putin sycophants, which too many, at least MAGA Republicans are today. The normal Republicans who actually care about this country have got to start speaking up, or their brethren are going to keep opposing Ukraine aid. And as I said, I fault Biden as well, because I think Biden has made no effort whatsoever to actually explain to people why this matters. And if he can't do it, then get freaking Barack Obama and Bill Clinton and other people who speak better than Biden to explain it. But he needs to explain it to people. All right. Let's jump in with the Q&A. We'll see if the YouTubers last since you disappeared on me and just came back, but oh well. Ooh la la. All right. Let's you guys on TikTok, remember you can submit questions via the Q&A link in my profile. The rest of you can use the links of the comment box at the bottom. If I'm not starving, we can go to Discord for a little bit afterwards. We can do that. I had a little snack before we did this. I'll go to the Discord a little bit afterwards and we can talk some more. Discord.aravosis.com. Oh, and remember on the Discord, we've got we're actually the auction is ending at 7:30 tonight. We've got an auction for one of the cool Ukrainian bracelets from Azovstal, made of the steel from the Azovstal steel plant. And that auction is ending at 7:30 tonight, meaning 7:30 my time Eastern. So in 45 minutes. Woo! Very scary. Anyway, yeah, let me jump in here on my phone first and look for TikTok questions, and then the rest of you can do the same. All right, one moment here. Tiki-taki, where are you? Q&A. All right. Is there still fighting in Kharkiv? Not really. I mean, in Kharkiv, pretty much it's the Russians are pushed back to the Russian border pretty much. So, I mean, I think I shouldn't say nothing. That's not true. I'm sorry. No. I shouldn't say that, because the Russians are still bombing Kharkiv. Okay. When you were saying fighting in Kharkiv, I was thinking like on the ground in Ukraine. No, but the Russians are still bombing Kharkiv, which is Ukraine's second largest city. And they're bombing the hell out of it. So that is still happening, but there is not, the Ukrainians have pushed the Russians basically out of the Kharkiv area in general. So that's good. I'm going to read the question though, because this I don't know about, and I've been trying to get an answer on this. Are the countries just donating these tanks and weapons? Is there a formal agreement for some future consideration from Ukraine, or even an implied debt? I don't know. Thanks, Ben. I do see your question. I'll get to you next. And I've been wondering about that, like how this is all working. Now, mind you, it's not like Ukraine is an oil-rich country or something where they're going to have a ton of money to pay us back for afterwards, right? Ukraine's not going to have any money afterwards because the economy's been destroyed, right? So, nonetheless, I just don't know, but they can't pay it back. I mean, they're not going to be able to pay it back. I mean, yes and no, because think about it. If the point is, and this is where, again, you have to, because somebody said surely they'd have to pay it back. Not necessarily, because we're not just doing this out of the goodness of our heart. Taking down the Russians is a big deal, and it matters for our countries as well, right? Russia is a threat, and especially now we realize Russia is a threat to Europe. So for European countries to donate these weapons to Ukraine so Ukraine can do the fighting for them is a big deal. And it's frankly a cheap deal, right? To be able to take down the Russian military and basically set them back for another 10 years. So I don't know, but I've not seen a very good explanation at all of kind of what the deal is with all of the weapons and everything and the money, because also we're not just giving weapons. We've been giving the Ukrainians money for their government to basically help keep the government running, because it takes money to run a government, because you've got staff and everything else. You know what I mean? You've got federal workers. And when the economy gets blown up, you're losing factories that are providing taxes. Your citizens are leaving, right? Ukraine lost several million citizens that fled the country. They can't pay taxes. They're not making any money. You've got, I forget whether it was 25% of the population might have been internally displaced, like within Ukraine. Again, a lot of them not making money. They can't pay taxes. So you've lost a lot of the tax base within Ukraine as well. The US and others have been providing that in the meantime. I don't know how Ukraine's going to pay any of it back. Sky News reported today, Ben says, that China is trying to distance itself from Russia. This is the Financial Times article. Yes. And some Chinese politicians believe that Russia will fail in Ukraine and become a minor power. Yes, this is based on a very interesting story from the Financial Times from 2 days ago, where the Financial Times interview, which is a big financial paper in Britain, kind of, I'd say their Wall Street Journal, very big, well-respected newspaper. And the Financial Times interviewed a bunch of Chinese, top Chinese government officials over the last many months, and found that the Chinese are not happy with the Russians. They feel like the Russians misled them, that basically going into the war, Russia did not say they were going to invade. Russia made it sound like, well, they might invade. And if they did, it would be small, is at least the impression Putin gave Xi, the Chinese premier. Well, then the Russians went in and clearly did a major invasion that was intended to take the whole country over. Chinese were not, well, mind you, the Chinese claim they didn't know. They claim they were not happy. Now, that could be revisionist history at this point, because they're trying to do a reset of their foreign policy. China is very worried about the fact that its relations suck now with much of the developed world because of Russia, right? China desperately needs higher economic growth. They have not been having it lately. Their economy, I mean, for China was really bad, like 2 and 3% or something last year, which is really bad. Good for most governments, bad for China. And they realized that they need better relations with Europe in particular, in order, because Europe, frankly, way bigger economy than Russia is. I think the European Union is like, I saw this the other day. The European Union was something like 12 times the size of Russia, the Russian economy. I mean, huge, the European Union, right? So the Chinese are trying to get in the better graces of the Europeans again. And the final reason is China is also worried because the war with Russia, the war with Ukraine and Russia, pushed the US and Europe back together, right? Trump did a pretty good job of cleaving the Europeans from the Americans. America wasn't willing to, provide. Well, it wasn't clear that America would provide a security guarantee to Europe. Everything about our cooperation with Europe was just cut in two under Trump. Biden has repaired that. The Europeans themselves have repaired that. And we are now working, hand in hand with the Europeans. And the Chinese are not happy about that because the Chinese would like to isolate the Americans. So that is a long way of saying that this is the main point of the Financial Times article, saying that for all those reasons, China's kind of pissed off at Russia and trying to reset the relationship with Europe. And this is my guess, is that part of the way China is trying to reset the European relationship is going, oh, we had no idea about that silly war. Russia never told us, right? That it was all a big mistake. They tricked us just like they tricked you. So sort of as to give China a way out of going, hey, Europe, please be my friend again. So yeah, it's a good article if you can get access to it. It's behind a paywall, of course, but it's probably from 2 days ago on the Financial Times. Julia, do you think McCarthy made concessions? He's talking McCarthy, Kevin McCarthy, the new Republican House Speaker in the U.S. House of Representatives. Do you think McCarthy made concessions to not support Ukraine at all to the Republicans who wouldn't vote for him for Speaker? This concerns me. I hadn't thought about that. It's entirely possible. It's entirely possible. They could have said, we don't want to pass any more Ukrainian aid. And he could have said, okay, now, whether he'll hold to that, there's no way of knowing. There's no way of knowing, but everyone's been trying to figure out what he promised, and he has not come clean. Marjorie Taylor Greene, for example, she of the Jewish space lasers. That's the neighbor's dog in the hall. The other neighbor who gets scared of the other, you guys, I don't know if you guys can hear it. They're screaming in the hallway. The one neighbor's dog gets very scared of the other dogs, like Sasha, but the other dogs does not like. So he's right now going, mania in the hallway. But yeah, we don't know. We don't know. People have been trying to find out what McCarthy promised to like Matt Gaetz, for example, right? What the hell did he get promised? Who was kind of another far right Trumper who ended up caving and finally supporting, not supporting McCarthy. He voted present, but it allowed McCarthy to win, right? What did he get promised, right? We don't know. So yeah, that would worry me. I think it's certainly a possibility. Yeah. That they said, no, let's see what the committee appointments are too, because one of the concerns was that McCarthy was going to appoint Matt Gaetz as in charge of one of the defense subcommittees in the House. And that basically he was going to, that Gaetz would use that as a way of stopping the Ukrainian aid. Now, final point to be made on that, I will say, is, did pass 45 billion or whatever it was before the, like a couple of weeks ago or whatever, right? In order to pass the budget, they included 45 billion or so for Ukraine. I say for Ukraine, it includes funding for European allies. It includes funding for American troops in Europe. It includes funding to buy more weapons for the American arms here in the States, because we've given Ukraine a lot. We need to rebuild our arms inventory here, right? So it's not just money for Ukraine, but it's money that is associated in some way with the Ukraine war. 20 billion, I think, or so is actual weapons. So that's a big deal. And that's about as much, this is probably coming on the show right after you've eaten. And it's like, everything's like, ugh. That is about as much weapons that we've given the Ukrainians last year. I guess it is last year now in 2022. So at least for the next year, we might be okay. We might be okay. Don't know though, but we might. Let me see here. Okay, I've got you guys. I mean, who knows on that one? That's funny. Jens is saying, did somebody tell Belarus, which, Ukrainian ally, that they, the Russians, thank you, Hazel, for that. I appreciate that. That's very generous of you. Did somebody tell Belarus that they, the Russians, were not just doing an exercise in Belarus, but also invading through their country? I mean, the Belarusian premier certainly knew, the dictator, I suspect, but certainly the citizens, they were probably told nothing at all. But I would suggest the president. Now, whether Putin got the premier to agree is a whole other question, right? When will we provide aircraft to Ukraine? Someday. You know, that's one of those again where it's going to take time. Unfortunately, I will say it's also one of those where um, the U.S. has at least claimed that providing airplanes to Ukraine would take a lot of maintenance and a lot of this kind of stuff, or like all the support stuff. I don't know if I'm sure it's true. I want to say, for example, I'm trying to remember what the percentage is, but I know a pretty significant percentage of our planes, of our fighter planes, are sort of always in repair. So they do take a lot of work. I know that. But you know, I mean, I think Ukraine's pretty much shown it can handle anything at this point. But fighter planes are later on. I think we may eventually. I guess the thing that I've been trying to figure out in terms of the aid we're providing Ukraine is I still don't quite understand, like the tank talk of the last couple of weeks. What's really what's provoking it? What's promoting it? Is it that? Thank you, Hilpy, for the flowers. Is it that we are worried that Ukraine isn't doing as well, and and we're trying to keep them in the race? Is it that Ukraine's doing really well, and we're saying, hey, maybe they can win this, right? I mean, that's a possibility. Is it out of concern that there are going to be some offensives in the spring? Whether it's we secretly know that Ukraine is planning a big offensive, and there's a possibilities, right? And therefore, the Western governments are saying, okay, we have got to help out. We've got to help out. So that's a possibility. Or is it that we have information that the Russians are planning a massive offensive in the spring, and we've got to do everything we can to stop the Russians from overrunning Ukraine? I don't know. I mean, but I've been very curious because each step of the way here, I feel like something must happen that shakes things up a little, that makes Biden and the other people, the Germans, forget it, but certainly even Biden, who's been very concerned about escalation. What is it that shakes Biden up and makes him go, okay, maybe we'll give weapons that we weren't going to give before? I don't know. I don't know about that. Now, that's an interesting question. Actually. That's more for the military folks. So Clifford Wolf is asking, are the constant use of the 777, now 777, I'm going to guess is a howitzer. I'm not up on what a 777 is. I'm assuming a howitzer. And HIMARS, which are the rocket system that we've given the Ukrainians, but you use these things a lot and they've got to be replaced. I know at least on the howitzers, the artillery, the actual gun, like the gun barrel has got to be replaced or whatever, right? Or it can explode on you. HIMARS, there's got to be similar issues with the HIMARS. I guess the issue there is going to be what have we provided them in terms of replacement parts? How often do you need to replace them, and how difficult is it to replace them? I mean, maybe we've given them more than enough, right? Oh, the M777 is like our Sign My Rocket. Okay, so it's like the one that we sponsored. Okay. It's going to depend on what we've given them, depends on what we've given them. So and how hard it is to fix this stuff. Now, I did read one thing. I did read that the actual, the guns on those artillery are incredibly heavy. And that was kind of a pain in the ass to move those things around. So I don't know, but you would think, obviously we've given them a lot of stuff. Use your words, John. Obviously, we've given them a lot of material in order to fix things, to replace things, etc. So hopefully that's not a problem. Marianne, thank you for that. We were talking about you yesterday. I had some Russian issue I was trying to raise. I forgot what it was. Something. Thank you for that. I forgot what it was now. What else, guys? We'll do another couple minutes because I know I started late today. YouTube, who even knows? I said YouTube, but the general group there, that got totally screwed up. But even you guys on TikTok, we started a little late, so we'll do some more. Anya's saying, I guess we sent plenty of parts and probably civilian contractors to help fix them in safe areas. Oh, that's an interesting idea. Yeah, sending the civilian contractors, that would be smart. Oh, hang on, let me go to the TikTok questions again. Hang on, Q&A. No, this was interesting. Okay, so any news on the Secretary of the Navy statement? So, did I? Oh, I think I did tell you guys this, that he gave a clarification. Oh, maybe I didn't though. There was a clarification that came later. Okay, yesterday the Secretary of the Navy was quoted as giving a really obnoxious comment about how in 6 months we may have to choose between whether Ukraine can whether we supply Ukraine with weapons or supply America, right? And it was like, what an obnoxious thing to say. And subsequently, the article quoted his comments as being a reporter asked him if we would have to choose between, and honestly his answer was we might get to that point. I'm paraphrasing, but people were saying, oh, his answer was really good. I don't think his answer was that good. I think anybody who has been putting out the message that we're very worried about whether we have enough weapons to provide the American military to defend America. Anybody who's putting that weapon out, or anybody who's putting that message out there is trying to undercut aid to Ukraine. Why would you slip that publicly, right? I mean, the president, the Congress, everybody knows whether we do or don't have enough weapons, and nobody's gonna leave America undefended. That's never gonna happen, because you're gonna lose elections on that in a minute. So when you go public to do it, you're doing it to try to undercut. So that, yeah, his quote was better than the reporter initially said. Still not great in my view. Let's not do that because it doesn't really deal with Russia. Well, I mean, with armored vehicles headed to Ukraine, do you think the Russians have any reliable anti-tank answer to that? I mean, yes, in principle. Again, the military folks here are going to know better than I do, or our resident military geeks. But the weapons we're providing so far are not tanks, right? Bradley fighting vehicle is not a tank. The German Marder is not a tank. They are stronger than some military vehicles, which is great. They're not as strong as tanks. So, Russian tanks would be able to take them out in principle. I don't know what the deal is with Russian helicopters and things like that, taking them out. I just don't know. But I think the bigger problem for the Russians comes what happens if, that's what I was exactly. Adam is saying the Bradley is a good tank killer, though. Yes. The Bradley is apparently a very good at killing Russian tanks, but good at protecting itself, but it's not as good as a tank is at protecting itself, right? So the bigger problem for Russia in terms of what does Russia have to respond is their tanks going after our tanks, right? Or their tanks, thank you, Marie, their tanks going after whatever tanks, the German Leopard tanks. Now, again, that gets into much more of a military person's discussion, which is how hard is it, for example, to kill a German Leopard tank, right? What could you use to do it? Could you only use another Russian tank to do it? Or, like I said, could you use helicopters? I mean, I just don't know enough about how you would do that. Like what it works. But that's the bigger issue for the Russians, is if the Ukrainians actually get tanks. Just looking at the questions again. Oops. Okay. Sorry, I'm going over some of the old questions here. Is Putin I'll do this one and then we'll maybe do a wrap up. Is Putin grasping at straws by firing Captain Armageddon? This is the was it Surovkin? Basically, Putin fired the guy in charge of the fighting in Ukraine and then replaced him with Gerasimov, who's kind of the top Russian military official, uniformed military official. Is Putin grasping at straws by firing Captain Armageddon? And is it the end of infrastructure? Is it the end of infrastructure being bombed? This was his main tactic. I was reading more on it today. I didn't see anything enlightening enough to sort of repeat what we talked about last night, because we went into it in depth last night. But differing opinions on what's going on with why this guy got sacked last night. Okay, why the current Russian in charge of the war. A lot of folks feel that there was a turf war going on inside the Kremlin, inside Moscow, and that basically you had like Kadyrov, the lunatic Chechen leader, Prigozhin, who's the guy in charge of the mercenary group, the Wagner group. So these are kind of the wild far-right nationalist types, or whatever you want to call them, versus Putin and Putin's, establishment Kremlin types, the defense minister, Shoigu, what is he? I always keep forgetting what his chief of the general staff or whatever it's called, who's Gerasimov, who's our chairman of the Joint Chiefs of Staff, would be the equivalent. So he's the top military official, the top uniformed military official in Russia. And that it was kind of a turf war and a battle between political factions. And finally, Putin picked the guys who are more loyal to him and the guys who are more his yes men. And that's what was really going on, because a lot of the critics of the war, people who think the war should have been fought more, firmly, right? We should have killed more Ukrainians. This kind of far right Russian nationalist opinion. They liked Surovkin. They liked him because he was bombing Ukrainian civilians. They felt like he was willing to do more than the other guys were willing to do. So I don't think that they're going to stop going after civilians. I doubt that. I think they're going to keep doing it. But as I said, I don't know. Actually, I'm sorry. The other thing I was going to tell you is I saw more discussion today that the shakeup in who was running the war for Russia is indicative of the fact that the Russians are planning on launching a big offensive, and sometime soon, maybe by spring, and that this was sort of Putin shaking things up and saying, okay, because let's face it, I mean, whether this guy's doing better or worse, the war hasn't changed for Russia. Russia still is having a bad time here, and it's not clear how Russia's going to win the war unless Ukraine caves or the West stops supporting Ukraine. So Russia's trying to shake things up, and the thought was he shifted up the leadership in order to do that. Thank you, Hazel, for that. Yeah, whatever. Bye, Alma. Sorry, crazy person. Let me tell you who the warmongers are. The U.S. and their buddy Z. Yeah, whatever. I know. Genocide brings out the worst in people. Well, the worst in the genocidal maniacs, at least. All right. Let me... Daniel. Sorry, Daniel. I did see yours and then I forgot. Thank you, Benji. Another reason to help defeat Russia is to uncover their war crimes. I've heard there may be as many as 100,000 victims in Melitopol alone. If Russia keeps territory, they can hide much of their war crimes and genocide forever. Yeah. Melitopol down here. This is Melitopol by my finger here. Again, to remind you, all of this is Russian occupied, going kind of up here and here. So Melitopol right in the thick of it in the south. Yeah, I mean, I worry about the war crime stuff. I do worry about the war crime stuff and whether anybody's going to be prosecuted, because it's just not easy to prosecute these people, but I don't know. But yeah, no, I agree with you though. Anyway, sorry guys. I'm like looking at this, seeing if there's anything else. I saw the heart there. Thank you for the heart there. That was boat drinks. All right. Let me do a quick, thank you for that, Daniel. I appreciate that. Let me do a quick recap, and then I think we will call it quits, guys, and I will go over to the Discord, and we can do a little hanging out on Discord, even though we're a little late tonight because of all the internet problems. So I will do the quick recap where I just go through the shows that we talked about. Milosevic. What about Milosevic? Well, oh, that's true. Oh, I'm sorry. Yeah. You mean as far as war crimes? Yeah, we did. We were able to take Milosevic pretty quickly, actually. That's true. All right, Russia. So to go through the quick stories that we hit on tonight, Russia and Ukraine are still fighting for control of Soledar in the east. The German vice chancellor says, I didn't mention this, but we talked about it in a larger context. The German vice chancellor says that Germany should not block Leopard tanks going to Ukraine. The former British Army chief says the UK should send far more tanks than just 12 to Ukraine, and that they need more on the order of 50 to even start making a difference. Russia is responding to the tanks going to Ukraine by threatening to nuke. This is Russian propaganda TV, not the Russian government, by threatening to nuke the UK, France, and Poland, which is never going to happen. Russia is talking about raising the age of conscription to 30 from 27. Belarus, according to the US, we do not see any signs of an imminent attack from Belarus into Ukraine. The British government says it has seen the reports, but has not been able to verify the status of the 2 British volunteers who have gone missing since last Friday. A Russian man was jailed for 5 years for refusing to fight. And then finally, the Washington Post reports that a CBS News YouGov poll shows a slight majority of Republicans, 52% to 48%, want their member of Congress to oppose further Ukraine funding. That's the bad one. All right, guys, let's get rolling. I will go over to the Discord, and we can talk about, maybe tonight we'll talk about the Biden. We can talk a little bit about the Biden, the mess with Biden's classified documents and all of that. I certainly have opinions on it, but I try to keep that stuff out of this discussion since I want this to be about Ukraine. So we can go to the Discord. It's discord.aravosis.com. We'll go over there. It's once you get there, and on Discord, you got to approve. If you're new to Discord, you got to approve and whatever. So click the read me, scroll through, read, click the button, and then the rest of the Discord will show up. Go to the left, go all the way down, voice channels, John's after party or after show or something about that. I try not to do the Biden, that kind of stuff in my Ukraine live. We could do maybe a separate live and talk about Biden. I wouldn't mind that, but I just try not to mix other American political stuff with the Ukraine stuff. So let's see. Who knows? I could do a separate live, maybe. We'll see. Okay, but let's at least tonight we can go talk a little bit over there. So go over to the Discord if you would, folks. Thank you all so much for joining. I know we had a lot of little technical difficulties tonight, especially for YouTube, Twitch, Facebook, etc. people. Sorry about that. It's going to make it living hell for anybody trying to watch it afterwards on YouTube. Yes, we will do the coffee chat again on Saturday for TikTok paid subscribers. We'll do our coffee talk. Maybe, let me see, probably 10:30. I say it'll probably be like 10:30 Saturday morning, Eastern time, US. But I'll let you know. I'll let you know tomorrow. But I'm hearing my dog must be in her little bed here. I heard the noise of a dog dream going on. When you heard like their when they try to bark but their mouth is closed. It was very cute. That was very cute. All right, the coffee talk. All right, guys. I will see you guys later. Go over to the Discord. And thanks again for everything. Thanks for the gifts, for, like I said, for all the hiccups, hanging with us, and for going after the trolls, mods of mine. Thank you so much. All right, guys. Sayonara. I'll see you guys tomorrow. Burp, burp, burp.